Hi, Perry. Welcome to the summit. Perry is one of the highest paid consultants in the world. He's the guy who made me do this as a charity event, and he's a reinventor of the 80-20 principle or the Pareto principle, and that's the reason why this event is even called the Pareto Summit. So, hello, Perry. Great to have you here on the summit. I was really looking forward to this interview, and please tell us what is the 80-20 principle and why you even wrote a complete book about this.
Thank you, Martin. It's great to be here. 80-20 is something most people have heard of. It's usually kind of out there on the fringes. It's actually the central law of cause and effect in the universe. And I'm not kidding about that. When I was a sales manager at a software company, I read in a book that 20% of your sales come from 80% of your customers, and 80% of your sales come from 20% of your customers. And of course, I already knew, a lot of people have heard about this guy named Vilfredo Pareto from Italy 100 years ago, who figured out that 20% of the people have 80% of the wealth and own 80% of the real estate. And so I knew that. So, but I read in the sales book about 80-20. So I went and I did a printout of my sales reports. I was like, yeah, sure enough. If I sort it from top to bottom, when I get 20% down through the list, that's 80% of the money. That's interesting. And then that was it. And I thought I understood it. And I really didn't understand it at all. And a few years later, I was reading a book by Richard Koch, and he made this just offhand remark that 80-20 had a lot to do with fractals and chaos theory. Well, that also sounds like one of those fringy things that like most people wouldn't need to know about, but it's actually a very central thing. And fractals are the idea that in nature you have patterns within patterns within patterns within patterns. So outside my window out here, there's a tree, and the whole tree, has its trunk and branches, but then I can zoom in on the branches, and I can zoom in on the twigs, and I can zoom in on the leaves, and it's branching, it's branches within branches within branches, and I can get a magnifying glass or a microscope, and I still see more branches within branches. That's fractal, okay? Well, when Richard said that, I thought, whoa, wait a minute. Am I understanding what this guy is really saying? Because if that's true, there's an 80-20 inside every 80-20. Wait a minute. Is that, whoa. And I jumped up out of the coffee shop, and I drove home, and I got out all these pieces of paper and a calculator, and I started looking stuff up on the internet. I'm like, oh my word, this is true. Okay, so what does that mean? Well, it means two things. First of all, it meant that not only do 20% of your sales come from 20% of your customers create 80% of your sales, it means 20% of the 20% create 80% of the 80%. So that means 4% of your customers give you 2/3 of your sales. And it means 1% of your customers give you half of your sales. And that's the first thing. The second thing is, this isn't just sales, and it's not just business. It's everywhere, okay? If you go to the beach with a bucket and you put some sand in the bucket, the size of sand in the bucket is 80-20. 20% of the sand takes 80% of the space, and 80% of the sand takes 20% of the space. And then you can reduce it down, 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 as far as you want to go, okay? It's the size of craters on the moon. It's the traffic on the roads in your town. 20% of the traffic is on 80% of the roads, and 80% of the traffic is on 20% of the roads. And 64% of the traffic is on 4% of the roads, and half the traffic is on 1% of the roads. And so this is in almost every spreadsheet. This is in almost every sales report. It's in product defects, and so 20% of the dirt on your car, 20% of your carpet has 80% of the dirt, because 80% of the walking traffic is on 20% of the carpet. It's everywhere. And so I discovered this, like, oh my word, this is a giant epiphany. This changes everything. So now I cannot look out a window and not see 80/20. It's everywhere. Well, so it's one of these things that's really simple and really deep. It's sort of like, well, how complicated can guitar playing be anyway? It's only 6 strings. Like a piano is 88. That's complicated. But a guitar, that would be simple because it's 6. No, no, a guitar is probably harder to play than piano. At least, I don't, it's tricky, right? Or drumsticks, right? Well, it's only 2 sticks. Like, how complicated can that be? Well, you ever been to a concert and seen a great drummer? You understand, like, so 80/20 is one of these things. It's this Zen-like, seemingly simple idea that's absolutely everywhere and affects everything you do. So you can literally spend the rest of your life figuring out how to tweak those tiny hinges that swing big doors. There's tiny little levers that make huge differences in your business, and you learn to harness inequality.
So how does this apply to business, and how can we use this in business? I remember one part of a seminar from you where you had people stand up and ask them who owns how many shoes, for example.
Yes. Okay, so once you see this, you can't unsee it. Okay? And so most of us, we treat most things in our business like they're equal, and they're not. We treat most employees like they're equal. We treat salespeople like they're equal. We treat customers like they're equal. So this is something I do every time I give a talk. I'll say, okay, everybody, if you own shoes, stand up. So everybody stands up. And then I'll say, if you own less than 5 pair of shoes, sit down. If you own less than 10, less than 20, less than 40, and I'll keep doubling the number of shoes. Okay, so, by the time you get to 20, most people are sitting down. But then I go 40, 80, 160, 320. Most of the time, there's still a few people standing up when I get to 160. Like, I gave a talk at Notre Dame Business School a month ago, and there was about 30 or 40 people there, and there was still 1 or 2 people standing up when I got to 160. Okay, one seminar, I had about 300 people in the room, and the person with the most shoes had 800.
Wow.
Okay, this is normal. Okay, this is not, and I wasn't at a fashion show. I wasn't at a shoe convention. I was at a business seminar, right? Same seminar, I did domain names, and one person in the room owned 5 million domain names. Okay, and so almost everything is like this. It's like how much property you own. It's a power law. So 1% of the people own 50% of the shoes. And so if you understand customer behavior is like this, what you understand is it's easier to sell 100 shoes to one person than it is to sell one pair of shoes to 100 people. Okay, now this is so important. And it doesn't seem like it should be this way. Logically, it seems like, well, everybody had to have like 3 to 5 pair of shoes, okay, they're going to have boots, and they're going to have sandals, and they're going to have regular shoes. No, like, some people love shoes, and this is what makes the world go round. Okay.
So what's the 1% as business owners that we need to focus on, and what's the epiphany that you had there, and how can we use that?
So the epiphany was, if I've got 100 people in the room and I want to sell 100 shoes, let's put money on it. Okay. If I want to sell 100 shoes, I could spend $100 selling the shoes to one person, and I'll sell all of them. Or I could spend $1,000 and not sell one pair of shoes to every person in the room. It's so hard to sell to the majority. Okay, it's incredibly hard to penetrate an entire market. Getting 100% market share is like boiling the ocean. But I could just focus on 10 people. If I focus on 10 people in that room, I'll sell 2/3 of the shoes that I could ever sell to anybody, and it won't cost me very much money. Or here's another example. You hire 10 salespeople. I guarantee you that 2 of them will outsell the other 8. Okay? 2 of them will sell more than all the 8 put together. It's a law of nature. It's like a law of physics. It doesn't really matter how hard you try to pick the good ones. 80-20 is still going to be true. And so this completely changes how you hire people, for example. So what most people will try to do, they'll hire 10 salespeople. 2 of them will do really well, and then they'll spend all their effort trying to fix the other 8. Okay, that's a waste of time. Now, you might be able to fix 2 or 3 of them, but I guarantee you half of them are a waste of time, and you should fire them. And if you take all that effort and you feed it to the top 2 salespeople, and you go, okay, so can I send them to training to make them even better? Can I help them with their expense reports and their travel? Can I give them an assistant so that they can spend more time selling and less time like doing paperwork? And I pour my energy into the exceptional ones, and I get rid of the unexceptional ones. I'll actually sell a lot more stuff with a lot less effort. This is true in Google AdWords accounts. This is true in Facebook advertising. This is true of websites. If you have a website with 1,000 pages, okay, everybody who has a website with 1,000 pages, at least once a year, they have a conversation and somebody goes, we need to redo the website. It's ugly. It needs a new template. It needs a makeover, whatever, right? Well, so then you spend months and months fixing 1,000 web pages. Well, half of your sales comes from 1% of your web pages. Okay, so you can redo 10 web pages and you get half the job done. And it's a lot easier to fix 10 web pages than to fix 1,000. And everything in business is like this. This will completely change the way you think about everything. It's a total revelation.
Yeah, when it comes to customer selection, you also talk about in your book about bleeding neck and the 5 power disqualifiers.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe you can tell us what that means and why it's important.
So I have a friend named John Paul Mendoza, and when John was 17, he dropped out of high school and he hitchhiked to Las Vegas and he became a professional gambler. And I got a couple stories about John that I'll tell you. But John eventually became part of a gambling ring. And this was a pretty rough bunch of guys. I mean, honestly, he was involved in organized crime and all kinds of really shady stuff. And one day he's sitting in a restaurant booth and these 2 guys next to him are having an argument. Yes, you will. No, I won't. Yes, you will. No, I won't. And the one guy, he pulls out a gun and he points it at the other guy's head and he says, yes, you will. And John's sitting there and going, you know what? If I stick around here any longer, I'm going to get a bullet in my head. I'm leaving. Okay. So after 3.5 years of being a professional gambler, he leaves gambling. Okay. And so at this point, I think he's 21. And he goes and he gets a job working for a company that sold some kind of computer electronics. Okay. Now, his boss puts 206 leads on his desk. And he goes, okay, I want you to go through all these sales leads. I want you to go meet with all these people, and I want you to sell them something. And his boss is not thinking 80-20. His boss is thinking like, well, if these people filled out one of these forms, I'm sure they're interested. So yeah, go sell this stuff. And John, having gambled in Vegas for 3 years, he understood 80-20 really well. And he goes, there is no way 206 people are going to buy anything. There's no way it's even worth meeting with 206 people. He says, I got to call these people on the phone. I got to figure out which ones I actually want to work with. And so John came up with this thing called the 5 power disqualifiers. And they are the 5 things that are true every time anybody sells anything to anybody. And this is really profound, okay? The 5 power disqualifiers are: 1, they have the money. If they don't have the money, they're not buying your stuff. Now, I know this seems really obvious, but I can't tell you how many years I spent. I must have thought if I held their hand and sang Kumbaya long enough that the money would appear somehow. And it didn't, okay? If they have the money. Number 2, they have a bleeding neck. Just yesterday, I talked to a guy who thought he was having a heart attack about 6 months ago. And he was taking a shower and he fainted on the ground, and his wife heard a noise, and she goes in there and he's laying on the ground, and they call the paramedics. And he said, I was, on one of those gurneys, looking up at the ceiling as they carried me out of my house, right? And then we took the ambulance to the hospital. And then when you get to the hospital and you've got a heart condition, he goes, it was incredible. It's like the doors fling open, they run you in there, all these people, like they're like, doctors are coming from everywhere and they're hooking stuff up to him. And he goes, my goodness, like they stop everything. Now, most of us have been to the emergency room, right? You go to the emergency room, you got a broken arm, right? And you think you're having a huge crisis. And the lady's like, okay, fill out this form and sit down over there and wait until we call you, right? Okay. And you're sitting in there with your broken arm, or you need stitches, or you're bleeding, or you have a bandage on your head, and you think you're having an emergency. The real emergency is when that heart guy comes through. Okay, that's what I mean by a bleeding neck. Okay, people with bleeding necks spend money. Okay, now my friend, 2 weeks before that happened, he probably wouldn't have spent $10 on a bottle of vitamins. But the day he's having a heart attack, if he had the money, he'd probably spend $250,000 to stop having the heart attack, right? They do anything. Get me in a helicopter, whatever, okay? They're not going to spend the money unless they have a bleeding neck. Urgent problems are what people spend money on, okay? Number 3, they buy into your unique selling proposition, not the other guys, yours, the way you solve the problem, okay? Number 4, they have the ability to say yes. Now, this is a big deal, okay? If you're trying to sell a kitchen remodel and you're talking to the husband and the wife is not there, you're not selling a kitchen remodel, right? And I'm not being sexist. I'm just telling you how people are, right? Or you go sell to a company, and I would have all these meetings with like some engineer. The engineer could say no, but he couldn't say yes. You have to go to his manager, right? So I meet with the engineer, and then I have to go meet with a manager. Oh, but the manager can't say yes either. We also have to talk to the purchasing agent or the department head, okay? You have to go see the person who can say yes, not just the person who can say no. And the fifth power disqualifier is it fits their overall plans. Okay, now, these 5 things, as simple as they are, A, what it means is marketing, listen very carefully, marketing is not a convincing people process. It is a disqualification process. Okay? Who doesn't have the money? Who doesn't have a bleeding neck? Who doesn't buy into my USP? Who can't say yes and only say no? Who doesn't fit their overall plans? Well, when you add all 5 of those things, that's 90 to 95% of the people. They're never going to buy anything. So stop trying and sweep them off the table and just focus on the ones that can. And your sales cost and your marketing cost and your time goes way, way down. Now, I want to tell you another story about John. Okay. So I just told you about the end of his gambling career. So here's the beginning. So John's 17 years old. He's lived in Vegas for a month and he's going, wow, this is harder than I thought it was going to be. Like he had this romantic idea about gambling from watching TV shows and stuff. Hey, this is like hard work. Like this is just like any other job, right?
Yeah,
like
I had it easier when I was playing a professional poker online, where I could play like 20 tables at the same time, or ticks. But please
yes,
go on with
exactly. And so he goes to a gambling bookstore. He's like, well, let me see if there's any good books in here. And he gets into a conversation with a guy who is a professional gambler, and his name is Rob. And Rob clearly knows what he's talking about. And he goes, Rob, is there any way you could teach me what you do? And Rob says, well, for a percentage of your winnings, I can teach you what I do. So they agree and they shake hands. All right, you'll be part of my professional gambling ring. So as soon as they shake hands, jump in the Jeep, John, we're going for a ride. So they get in a truck and they're driving down the road. And John says, okay, so how do I win more poker games? And Rob says, the way you win more poker games is you need to play people who are going to lose. And those people are called marks. You want the kid who just inherited $5,000 from his grandma, and he's from Wichita, Kansas, and he just flew into Vegas, and he thinks he's going to get rich, and he's an idiot. That's the guy you want. And John says, where do you find that guy? And he goes, let me show you. And he pulls into a parking lot of a strip club. And he goes in there, and there's all these people, and there's all these women, and there's lots of distractions, and there's loud music going on. And Rob sits John down at a table, and Rob always carried a sawed-off shotgun everywhere he went in his jacket. Okay, he pulls a sawed-off shotgun out of his jacket. He holds it under the table. He opens it up, and then he slams it shut so it goes. Shh. Okay, that's called racking the shotgun. And he racks the shotgun, and a few people in the club, just a few, like a couple of biker guys over in the corner, they turn around. They're like, "Hey, who made that noise?" Okay, and you know they're like reaching for their gun, like they're ready to rumble. And the owner comes over. He's like, "Hey, what's going on over here?" "Hey, it's all right. Just teaching the lad a lesson. Don't worry about us. We're not going to cause any trouble." John, did you see those biker dudes who turned around when they heard that sound? And John goes, yeah. And he goes, those guys are not marks. Don't play poker with them. Play poker with everybody else. Okay, that is 80-20. And that is what I call racking the shotgun. In my book, 80-20 Sales and Marketing, all through the book, rack the shotgun. So you send an email. Some people open it. Some people don't. That's racking the shotgun. Some people click on the link and some people don't. That's racking the shotgun. Some people sign up for the webinar or the series, like in this what you're doing now, right? So some people sign up for the free stuff, and some people don't. That's racking the shotgun. Some people sign up for the paid version. That's racking the shotgun. Some people buy the super expensive premium version. That's racking the shotgun. Some people buy another thing after that. That's racking the shotgun. Everything you do in marketing is rack the shotgun, rack the shotgun. And this is going on all the time. It's going on Facebook and Google and at the department store and downtown and, you know, in the stock market. Rack the shotgun, rack the shotgun. This is going on all the time. And what you have to realize is that most people are going to ignore you, right? Like 80% of the people won't open the email. But see, 20% will. And 20% of the 20% do the next thing. And 20% of those people do the next thing. And 20% of those people do the next thing. And you end up with the lady who buys 800 pairs of shoes. And that's where most of your money is going to come from. So you design your business for that person. You don't design the business for everybody. And it becomes so much easier. It's less time, it's less effort, it's less money, because you're flowing with the patterns of nature instead of fighting nature. Most business owners, most entrepreneurs, most marketers, most salespeople, they fight nature, and they fight nature, and they fight nature, and they think they're being brave, and they think they're being valiant. No, they're just being ignorant.
Yeah, one thing I would like to add about the poker principle is that you want to sit left in front of the marks, because the money is actually going in this direction, so it's flowing. And just by knowing this simple rule, you will be a winning player in poker. And yeah, that's really important. And one chapter I really liked about your book is called do you want to make $10? Do you want to make $100 or $1,000 or even $10,000? And yeah, it also applies the 80-20 principle to how we manage our time. And yeah, so you have a table there. And can you tell us a little bit about, like, yeah, how you manage your time, why you're one of the highest paid consultants in the world, and what you focus on, and what people should focus on in their business?
So most people think about time the wrong way. So most of us think about, okay, so let's say you're a dentist and you own a dentist office and you have a receptionist named Helen, and Helen makes $20 an hour, okay? And she answers the phone. All right, so you think of Helen as like, okay, so that's $20 an hour, that's 33 cents a minute, right? It's, you know, whatever that is a day, $160 a day. And that's how you think about Helen. That's the wrong way to think about Helen. Here's the right way to think about Helen. You spent a ton of money on advertising. You spent a ton of money having a building, having a telephone, hiring a receptionist to answer the telephone. The office is really busy, and the phone rings, and somebody has seen one of your ads and they call in, and Helen says, "Can you hold, please?" And then they put the person on hold, okay? And the person sits there on hold for 2 minutes, and they finally hang up, and they call another dentist office, and they would have spent $20,000 getting expensive dental work done because, you know, they need some crowns or something, okay? Helen just lost you $20,000 of revenue in 2 minutes, okay? How many dollars an hour is that? Okay, well, it's something like $600,000 an hour. Okay, Helen, by putting somebody on hold, lost you $20,000 in 2 minutes. Okay, so is Helen's time worth $20 an hour? Or is it worth more like $2,000 an hour or $20,000 an hour? Like, So let's take 1 hour. Never mind that it happened in 2 minutes. Let's say the only thing Helen does in 1 hour is answer the phone correctly and do a good job. How much is Helen worth? Okay. And see, again, this was $600,000 an hour.
Yep.
That's how much the time is actually worth. There are many, many 10-second, 1 minute, 2 minute, 5-minute stretches where our time is suddenly extremely valuable, okay? So negotiating the price of just about anything is extremely highly paid work, right? If you're going to get a kitchen remodel and you spend an extra 5 minutes talking to the guy and you drop the price by $5,000, you got $5,000 for 5 minutes of your time, right? But then let's generalize it to other tasks. So I say there's $10 an hour work, $100 an hour work, $1,000 an hour work, $10,000 an hour work. Now, Helen's phone call, that's $10,000 an hour work, okay? Even for a $20 an hour receptionist, right? Never mind the dentist, right? How much is he worth, right? How much is he worth? Let's say the person needing dental work gets on the phone and they get a really, really good answer to a question. That dentist time could be worth a huge amount of money. But so $10 an hour, that's emptying the trash. It's going to the office supply store and buying pens and pencils.
I would add at least there's not only $10 per hour work, but in your chapter in the third edition of your Facebook book, you have a warning right in the beginning that most people who want to become experts and running a business, like running some kind of consultancy for Facebook, they are actually wasting their time on Facebook. And this is time where they do not make any money at all. They're just consuming and consuming. And I just read one of your newsletters where you said, like, in this day and age, 99% of the people are zombies basically, and 1% is the one who controls the rest of the people. So I think it's really thinking about, like, it's not just like everything you do is productive, but it's so important to focus on the right task. So please go ahead.
Yes, that's right. So yeah, lots of people are doing $1 an hour work. Right? I mean, it may have a little bit of value, but really it's nothing. But then there's $100 an hour work. Like $100 an hour work is like helping a customer solve a problem, or, you know, making the dental office more beautiful and presentable. But then there's $1,000 an hour work. Like $1,000 an hour work is anything you do that actually gets you new customers, or anything you do that keeps the existing customers coming back more times and longer, right? And so, like Helen, even though you're paying her $20 an hour, you should try as best you can to have her doing $100 an hour work so that you do $1,000 an hour work. And then you work on the systems. Like, if you can devise a system by which nobody ever gets put on hold, and that a phone call like that always gets to the right person right away, then that's $10,000 an hour work that you are doing making that happen. And so there's lots of $10 an hour work. There's a little bit of $1,000 an hour work. Most people will just instinctively think, well, I could never make $1,000 an hour. Wrong. No, you answer that phone correctly, and you get that person to come in, that is $1,000 an hour work. And once you're aware of it, you can do a little more and do a little more, do a little more.
Yeah, in everyday life, for example, this can be like the mortgage for your house or something like this. If you just do a little bit more research, like this can easily add up to $10,000 over the course of 10 years or something, or even more.
Yes.
So it's like these are the highest leverage things that you can do. And but one thing that I noticed for myself, and that's why I built Find Focus, like, is even if I know about all these things, and that my time, like, sometimes is more valuable, and just consuming stuff and watching funny videos on Facebook is not right. Like, how can we make ourselves act on this knowledge? Like, what's your approach there?
So the absolute worst way to start your day is this. I'll show you. You reach across your pillow and your nightstand, and you pull your phone into your bed, and you start reacting to stuff. Okay, that is the worst way that you can start your day. Okay, now here's how the best way to start your day. The way I start my day is I got my pen or pencil, I got my notebook, and my cup of tea. And before I react to anybody, reply to anybody's email, reply to anybody's text message, get on social media, watch the news, maybe I just got out of the shower. Most people have good ideas, like you wake up in the morning, then you take a shower, and it really gets your body going. There's a great reason why we all do this, right? Then it's like, I just got a great idea. You come and you write down your great idea in your notebook, and then you spend at least 20 minutes a day, like, centering yourself. All right. Good morning. Thank you for a new day. Thank you for dinner we had last night. Start with gratitude. Start with, okay, what do I want to do today? What's important today? What's on the calendar? What's the $10,000 an hour work? What's the $1,000 an hour work that I'm going to do today, right? And then you do your $1,000 an hour work before you do anything else. And after that's done, then and only then do you get into email and reacting to the world and calling people on the phone and doing all this kind of stuff, okay? If you do that, it will completely change your life. You will be less stressed. You'll be more deliberate. You'll be sharper. Your intuition will be better. You'll be less distracted. And frankly, you'll be less unhappy. Okay, news and social media make people grumpy and irritable, okay? Fake news, Donald Trump, polarization, Brexit, whatever everybody's arguing about, okay? Like, why on earth do you want to argue about Brexit at 9 o'clock in the morning? What, are you going to change it? You're going to fix it? Really? Are you crazy? Right? That thing's been rattling around for 3 years. Like, stop it. Like, I'm really serious. Or like, if you're staying in a hotel, you go down to the free breakfast and they're playing CNN on the TV. Don't sit in there and watch CNN. It's a bad way to start your day. It's a horrible way to start your day. Don't start your day with the news. I am so serious about this. If you start your day with $10,000 an hour instead of the news, after you did your meditation, you're going to get stuff done. I get a lot of stuff done. Go look at my books, look at my biography, look at my projects, look at my website. I get a lot of stuff done. I don't watch the news. Most of the time, my wife is like, so, do you know what's going on? No, what's going on? And somebody will always tell me. It's never failed. Somebody always tells me if I really need to know. But I don't need to watch the news.
One thing that I really liked, and where it also applies to the 80-20 principle, is how you manage your information intake. I think I remember, if I remember right, like, you only read books that have a certain age, or like, how do you approach your information intake?
Okay, so I've got this saying: read a book written before Gutenberg every day. Okay, now why on earth would I say something like that? So we have a problem in our modern society, and the problem is, you can say, take a picture. Look, everybody, I had sushi for lunch today. And 0.3 seconds later, it's on Twitter, right? Okay. the fact that information is instantaneous creates a lot of really low quality information. Like the fact that your friend ate sushi today is completely irrelevant. You don't need to know it. It doesn't matter. Okay. Now, let's go back 500 years before the invention of the printing press. So books are handwritten or they're on scrolls. Okay. If you have a book or a scroll, it's been copied by hand, and it's a copy of a copy of a copy of a copy that, like, so Plato or Aristotle or the Bible or any, anything like that, 99.999% of the information in the ancient world got destroyed. Okay, Rome got burned, Alexandria got burned, cities were sacked. Okay, and the most valuable stuff, it got hidden in caves, and it's still around, in 1500 AD, even before the printing press. Okay, that is the complete opposite of Twitter. Okay, so if Twitter is the most trivial, poorly thought out, ephemeral stuff, then pre-Gutenberg is the most permanent, important stuff. So I'm not saying only read old books. I'm not saying that. But if you read something written before Gutenberg every day, then you're almost certainly reading something that is true, or something that civilization has deemed this is very, very, very useful, right? Like all those Bible stories, whether you think they're literally true or not, they all have incredibly, incredibly important lessons, right? And you should know them. Like, well, most people don't know this stuff anymore. They should. It will. Now, here's what this really does for you in business and in interactions with people. It gives you a very clear understanding of what does not change. Okay, if you read Shakespeare, you will figure out people are exactly the same now as they were 400 years ago.
Yeah,
People
I
have
have
not.
the same when I'm reading Seneca. Like the society in
Yes.
Rome was completely the same as it is right now, and
Yes.
this book, like it can be translated to like one-to-one to our time. And one
Yes.
question that I have, like on the summit, people will get exposed to a lot of different business opportunities, different business strategies. So how can they choose? Which one is right for them? I know you have something called the marketing DNA, which is a test that they have. But do you have any ideas? Because I do not want people to watch all the interviews. I want them to watch the ones that make most sense in their business. So any advice there?
Okay, so my client Mark McShirley, who is 4 years ago, he was living in his mother-in-law's basement, and now he's running a company with more than $10 million in revenue, and he's doing very well. Mark has a saying: there's few principles, many ideas, and few decisions. Okay, this is really good. There are only a few principles that are going to make your business work, and I try to focus very hard on principles. 80-20 is a principle. 80-20 is still going to be around in 10,000 years. There's a lot of stuff that's not going to be around in 10,000 years. Okay? Now, in the 80-20 book, I have a back door to take the marketing DNA test. And what I realized was, after working with thousands of salespeople and thousands of companies in 300 industries, every kind of industry you can imagine, what I realized was there is a stereotype of what salespeople and marketing people are like, but the way that people actually sell is all over the place. There's all kinds of different selling styles. And even a nerdy computer programmer has a way of selling if you can understand what it is. And it works. Okay, he's gotten as far as he's gotten in his life. He's convinced people to help him with stuff. And so I created this thing called the marketing DNA test. And there's a free link inside the 80/20 book where you can go take it instead of paying the $37. And the marketing DNA test tells you what kind of salesperson you are. So there are some salespeople that I call hostage negotiators. Okay, you throw them in a situation and they talk to everybody and the conversation goes a million miles an hour, and then like they walk out and they got the purchase order or they got the hostages free or whatever, and you go, how did you do that? And they go, I don't know. Okay, so that's like one kind of salesperson. But here's a completely different one. The guy that spends 6 weeks editing a bunch of videos, right, and getting them to look perfect and getting the story just exactly right. Okay, that's another one. Or here's another one. The copywriter who sits in his cave for 3 months and he writes all these emails and he writes all these sales letters and stuff, right? Or he writes a whole entire book, right? And then like the day comes and you push the button and all this stuff goes out and a whole bunch of money shows up, right? That's another. No, I just gave you 3, and they're all completely different from each other. The hostage negotiator is completely different from the video guy, completely different from the copywriter, and there's other ones, right? So you need to sell the way you sell. You don't need to sell the way like all these other people sell. And the marketing DNA test will tell you how you sell. I've got a guy who was a computer programmer. He took the marketing DNA test. It said, you should be a copywriter. 18 months later, he was making $100,000 a year as a copywriter, and he quit his job as a computer programmer. His name is Joshua Earl, and you can look him up. He's pretty well-known copywriter now. And that was because of the marketing DNA test.
Okay, and we're nearing the end of this interview, but one thing that we have not talked about is testing. And one thing that I learned from all the speakers is it's so important to stick with one thing and get really good with this. And I think because it's so powerful is because you can test and optimize things. And I think that's a great last section of this interview where you can tell us a little bit about how to approach testing and why it's so powerful when combined with the 80/20 principle.
So a lot of people think about business in terms of success and failure. That's not the right way to think about it. The way to think about it is testing. A, B. This test was better. Like I tested A and B was better. I tested A and B, and A was better. And you just look at like life as an ongoing science experiment. And now if you test a lot of A's and B's, you're going to find one thing that sells 90% and everything else you tested only sold 10%. You're going to find these little levers, right? It's like, okay, so the right Google ad, the right landing page, the right sales page, the right webinar or phone call or what, like you string these things together and all of a sudden you have a very, very profitable business. And basically it works for about 5 reasons, like not 155 reasons. Like there's basically just these 5 things and they make the business work. And guess what? You can probably stop doing most of the rest of the stuff that you've been doing.
Yeah, and one thing that I would like to add to this is that as Marcus does, we often do not even understand why it's one way or the other. There are some things
Right.
that we know that are true for human psychology. I think Dan Riley wrote a great book about this with Predictably Irrational. But it's just like we know that there are some percentage of people who get triggered by this, and if we test it, we can trigger some certain things, but we do not know exactly why it is. So it's really hard to know in advance. We really need to test this.
Yes, absolutely. The marketplace is vastly smarter than any expert. Okay, and it's like it's a relief when you discover I don't have to know everything. There's a lot of things I can just test them out. and I don't need to be the expert. It's a huge relief. It just takes a weight off your shoulders.
There was a huge relief when I read one book by Nassim Nicholas Taleb that we humans, there are a lot of things we will never understand. And that's something I think you also talk about in Evolution 2.0, which is one project that you're working on.
Mm-hmm.
And as we're ending the end of this interview, or we're nearing the end of this interview, is there any final advice you would like to give to our audience?
So if you read 80/20 Sales and Marketing, you will suddenly look out the window and you'll see, oh, there's an 80/20, and there's one, and there's one, and there's one, and you'll never see the world the same way again. And when you understand 80/20, you can walk into any business and you can start fixing stuff. And most of what you do will work because you're working on the real levers. And I mean, if you master 80/20, it's kind of like saying, you know what, if you learn to play the guitar good enough, you can get a gig in any club in town. They'll pay you to come in. Well, that's how it is with 80/20.
So thank you, Perry, for this fantastic interview. I think the 80/20 principle is so fantastic. And if people want to get a feel for what it really looks like, you developed a calculator on the 80/20 curve, which is amazing, which will help you to get an understanding from this from a mass perspective. And as a former poker player, I know how important it is to run the numbers, to get a feeling for these numbers, because this is something that does not come natural to most people, understanding probabilities. So there, and I will also put a link to your website where people can get your book for one penny. And I just checked, you even ship internationally now. Last time I checked, I bought this book on Amazon, but now you're even shipping internationally.
Yes, so we are.
Thank you very much for this fantastic interview, and I highly recommend everybody to check out Perry's book and all the other books that he wrote, because this is really the 80/20 of all the information, all the marketing information that you can get, the 1% that will really push your business forward.
Thank you, Martin. Thank you, everybody.
Yeah.